Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Nun Amud Aleph, starting with Memtes Amud Beis, 6 lines from the bottom at the new Gemara. Our Mishnah had taught us when a person is traveling and before Shabbos comes in, he realizes that he's 4,000 amos away from his bayis. And he knows that he will not be able to then make it to his bayis by the time Shabbos comes in. Yet he knows that there's a tree 2,000 amos away. So he wants to be then koine shvisa by that tree. So Chazal allowed him to then be koine shvisa without pas, but with ragle adam. And therefore, he's able to then be koine shvisa in that place. If he were to say, however, that I want that my shvisa to be koine tachas the ilan, so the Mishnah says, Ein oimer klum. He didn't say anything. Ask the Gemara, Mai loy omar klum? What does it mean he didn't say anything? Omar Rav, loy omar klum kol iker. It means that he has no shvisa whatsoever. In other words, first of all, he was oiker the makom where he is. And therefore he intended not to be then koine shvisa where he is. In addition to that, since where he wanted to be koine shvisa underneath the tree, there he did not specify. Therefore, he doesn't even have 2,000 amos where he is, and not certainly where he wanted to be koine shvisa underneath the tree, whereby he only has daled amos. He can't even go beyond the daled amos where he is to get to then underneath the tree. Because again, where he is situated, he wanted to then uproot that in order to be koine the shvisa from tachas ha'ilon. So therefore, he doesn't have not the 2,000 amos where he is now from, and not then the 2,000 amos from the tree either. Ushmul Omar, loy Omar klum lebeisoy. Shmuel argues and says, when it says loy Omar klum in the Mishnah, means he doesn't have the makom shvisa to go to his house. However, says Shmuel, aval tachtov shel ilan matzi azil, but he still is kind of shvisa by the ilan. In other words, he can have 2,000 amos to get to the ilan that he does have. He just cannot go further from the ilan to the bayis. Why not? Explains the Gemara. Aval tachtov shel ilan matzi azil. He could then be kind of shvisa underneath the ilan. V'nase tachtov shel ilan chamar gamal. The reason why he cannot go from the Ilan to his bayis is because Chamar Gamal. Now we're talking about a situation where between where he is standing and the end of the tree, he has 2,000 amos. That means even at the other side, the further side of the tree, he has 2,000 amos. So he's going to be able to acquire shvisa on that tree, underneath the tree. However, but in regards to then the tree, only from the trunk of the tree to the bayis is 2,000 amos, whereby the furthest part away from the bayis of the tree is going to be beyond 2,000 amos. And therefore we say, Chamar Gamal will be Machmer mi Moishech to both studim as follows. Bolim dod minat tzafon. If he wants to then measure from the tzafon, the side of the tree that's towards the bayis, Moidedin lo min hadorom, will be stringent and say you are to then measure from the southern side, the other side of the tree, which would be again beyond 2,000 amos from where the bayis is. If he wants to measure from the south side, that means the side that's closest to the place where he is situated, and that's where his daled amos is going to be, then then we will measure from the furthest end of the tree, which is still within the 2,000 amos of where he is situated, but he would not be able to then go backwards a single amma. Either way, we see over here that we may find that beyond 2,000 amos is where the bayis is then going to be situated from the tree, whereby he cannot then go from the tree to the bayis. He's only able to then be koine shvisa underneath the tree. Now on top of Daf Nun Amud Aleph, Omar Rabbi now says, my taimo de Rav. Shmuel, we understand that he was koine shvisa underneath the tree. Because after all, we said that where the place where he is situated is 2,000 amos to the far end of the tree. So where anywhere in the tree, he then has within 2,000 amos. So he's koine shvisa. That we understand. But asks Rabba, why does Rav say that he's not koine shvisa underneath the tree? Mishum deloi mesayim asrei. He answers because the reason for Rav is because he did not specify a specific place underneath the tree. If you don't specify which dalad amos, specifically where underneath the tree, then it doesn't have any validity. There are those that explain, Omar Rabba, my time with the Rav. There are those that say that Rav said the reason for Rabba said the reason for Rav is Mishum Diksovar, Kol She'eno Bezeh Achar Zeh, Afilu Bebas Achas Eno. There's a principle that which you cannot do this after that, then you cannot do it together. For example, if a person, we know it's also for him to marry a woman and her sister. So therefore, just like a person cannot marry a woman and then her sister, he cannot marry a woman and her sister together. So too over here, since the whole area of underneath the tree, each has more than dalad amos, so therefore, since he is not able to then be koine the more than one dalad amos of that area, he can't, even every dalad amos of underneath that tree is something that he would want to be koine, and he can only be koine one of them. So since he can't be koine ze achar ze, so then bebas achas, all at the same time, he can't be koine also one dalad amos space underneath the tree. My beinayu, what is the difference between the two explanations? Ika benayu, the Omar liknu li be'arba amos migoy shmoina. When he says, acquire for me dalad amos within the 8 amos, then we say, man the Omar mishum de lo mesayim asrei holo mesayim asrei. The one who says he didn't specify the exact place, here also he didn't specify. He just said 4 amos of the 8. He didn't say which 4 amos. So therefore it will not be valid. That's according to the first explanation. But over here, it is going to be valid because he said 4 out of the 8, specifying 4 out of the 8. That's enough. Then he's not saying zeh achar zeh or saying bebas achas. Memela, it's going to be a good dalad amos because dalad out of the shmoine. Says the Gemara, the hocha arba amos kamar. He said dalad amos. He said dalad amos of the 8, whereby he's going to be koine according to the second explanation, since here it is not considered to be bebas achas. Says the Gemara, now bringing back the previous statement, gufa. Omar Rabbi kol davar she'eno bezeh achar zeh afilu bebas achas enoi. The Gemara now challenges this statement of Rabba. Eisvei Abai leRabba. Abai challenges Rabba and says, Hamar bebe ma'isrois peiroisa mesukonim u'ma'isroisa mekukolim. If a person were to take more than the designated required amount of ma'aser requires 10% of one's crop. So if let's say he has 5 bushels of wheat and he takes 1 bushel, that's 20%. So it says over here, the other 4 is going to be edible. It's going to be something that then is considered to be taken maestros from. However, that one that he did take meiser from, that will be mekulkal. When he gives it to the Levi cannot eat it because that one that he gave to the Levi has partially meiser and partially doesn't have anything, has tevel in it. So therefore, since it's mixed together, it's going to be mekulkolin. Amai, why is this so? Leimo kol she'eno bezeh achar zeh, afilu bebas achas eno. Say that the same way that you could not take, let's say if you had 10 bushels, you couldn't take 1 out of being for meiser, and then subsequently take a second one to take from meiser. Once you took 1 from meiser, then the second one's not going to have any validity. So just like you can't do zeh achar zeh, then you would not be able to do bebas achas. You shouldn't take, out of the 5, you can't take 1, which would be 20%, and say that which is given to the Levi has both meiser and tevel mixed together. So if we say this principle, it should not be that the payers are mesukonim, u'maisroisa mekukolim. Answers the Gemara, Shaini Meiser De'ise Lachatzoin. Meiser is different because Meiser is such that if you were to take half of, let's say, a fruit, to Meiser half of it, it would be Chal. It would be considered to be a good Meiser. The Omar Tikdosh Palga Palga Dichitosa Kodsho. If he says, I want to sanctify with Meiser half of the Chita, then it will be considered to be sanctified as Meiser. So we see over there it's different. When it comes to then a person then making the designation of Meiser, even though he does 20% at once, we say that he intended only half of it, and only half of it is going to be valid. So therefore Meiser is different. I asked the Gemara, V'harei Meiser Behemo, the Lesin Lechatzoin. Meiser Behemo doesn't have this concept of Chatzoin. You're not able to then take half of the animal. When it comes to Meiser and Behema, every 10th animal has to be designated as Meiser and then be brought as a carbon. We don't say that half of that animal can be designated as Meiser. The Omar Rabba, and still Rabba states, Rabba himself, Yotzu Shnayim Ba'asiri V'Karon Asiri. If two animals go out, there's a little door that's only wide enough usually for one animal to go out. So as they go out, the 10th one is given a red ink on it to designate it as Meiser, as the 10th animal. If two animals went out at the same time, Yotzu Shnayim Be'asiri V'Karn Asiri, and he called them, he designated them as Asiri, then the din is, says Rabbah, Asiri ve'echadasar murovin zeh bezeh. Both the 10th and the 11th are mixed together. One will be Meiser, and the other one will be Shlomim. But we see over here that indeed it's going to be over here a valid Meiser, even though we don't say Meiser lechatzoin. Hi, how can you do that bebas achas? You wouldn't be able to do it zeh achar zeh if you had the 10th animal go through and you hit it with a red ink, designate it as the 10th animal, as Meiser. If another animal then you designate subsequently, it will not have any validity. So why are we saying that it works over here? Bebas achas. Answers the Gemara, Shaini Meiser Behemo, the Isa Bezeh Achar Zeh Betos. Because there's a concept that if it went one after the other by mistake, it also will then have validity. It'll become a hekdesh. It'll become Meiser. This nan, like it states in the Mishnah, Kora Litchi Asiri, if one called the 9th animal, erroneously he made a mistake and he called the 9th animal the 10th, Ula Asiri Tishi, and the 10th one that was truly 10 he called 9, Ula Achadasai Asiri, and then he was so confused, he wanted to then fix up his mistake, he called the 11th 10, then Shloishtem Mikudoshin, all three are going to be Mikudoshin. That means that one will be Meiser and the other two will be Shlomim. But we see the concept of Zeh Achar Zeh in the case of Meiser Behema, Betos. Ask the Gemara, but still, V'harei Toida the Lesin Betos, V'Lesin Bezachar Zeh. The carbon Toida that is brought together with 40 loaves of bread. 40 loaves of bread are separated, and then subsequently the animal is shechted, whereby those loaves of bread become niskadesh. So it says over here, there's no concept of making a carbon toida and making the 40 loaves of bread betos. That means if a person was already mafrish and he made a mistake thinking that he didn't mafrish 40 loaves, and then he was mafrish a second set of 40 loaves, we don't say that the second set of 40 loaves is valid. And it's not going to work one after the other. And therefore, if he designated 40 loaves and then decided he wants to then designate another 40 loaves, it's not going to work. It's not going to have any validity. The Itmar states, yet, toido shenishcheto al shmoinim chalois. If you have a carbon toida that was shechted on shmoinim, on 80 loaves of bread, that means to say that the carbon was shechted and therefore it then came to then be on the 80 loaves. So there's a machlokes. Chizkiya Omar, that means that all at once. Chizkiya Omar kadshu Allah mem mitoy shmoinim. Even though he did it all at once of the shmoinim, but we say that the 40 that is necessary was going to be valid of the 80. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Lo kadshu Allah mem mitoch shmoinim. So nonetheless, we see that from Chizkiah that indeed it does work with bas achas. So how could that be? Korban Torah does not have toes and doesn't have zechar zeh. Answers the Gemara, Ha'itma Allah am Rabbi Zeira. Rabbi Zeira taught about this Mishnah, about this statement. Hakol moedim, everybody agrees, both Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan. Heicha da'amar likandishu. When he says that a become kadosh, arboim mitoshmonim dekachu. If he says 40, he designates 40 out of the 80. He says, I want these 40. Then everybody, including Rabbi Yochanan, would agree that it's niskadesh. Lo yikdeshu arboim ela imkein kadshu shmoinim. If he says it's not kodesh 40, unless all 80 are going to become sanctified, then everybody, including Chizkiah, will say it's not kodesh. Ki pligi, what are they arguing about? Bistama, when he did not say one way or the other, and he has 80 in front of him. Mar sover la'achrayois kamechavein va'altnoi aisinhu. Chizkiah holds that he's concerned that maybe something might happen to 40 of the loaves, whereby he makes a condition. If that indeed happens, something happens to the 40 loaves, they get ruined, then he's allowing the other 40 loaves to be chal. On top of Nun Amud Beis, Umar Sovar lekarben gadol kamechavim. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says that he has kavanah for a large korban of 80, and therefore it doesn't work.